All right, and now is the time of our meditation. Now is the time where we take a deep breath and we begin to just feel centered in this present time, in this present moment. It is the time where we release any worries, any anxieties, any stresses, anything that no longer serves our highest good. And we take a deep breath and we just center to that breath, to that connection and that divine, not only within, but that connection and that divine that we are. Just allowing the chair to support your weight. Allowing your feet to be rooted to Mother Earth. And now I invite you to think about peace for a moment. Whether you visualize the word or something that brings you peace, just allow yourself to feel this peace. Not peace that's out there, out in the world somewhere, but the peace that's inside of you right now. Allow yourself to feel that peace and just really connect to it. Really beginning to understand what it means to be that peace. Now I invite you to visualize love. Again, whether it's the word or a color, a feeling or a phrase, just visualize love. Taking it a step further and not only feeling it, but imagine being. Allow yourself to feel the love that you are. And as we prepare in just a moment to enter into a few moments of silence, I invite you to bring to mind oneness. And in that oneness, it expands beyond just your skin. It expands into the people sitting next to you and the people beyond these walls. Just allow yourself to feel and to be that oneness as we move into our period of silence. as you begin to bring your awareness back to this room and back to this time and this place, we know that those things, we know that peace and love and oneness, they aren't just words. They aren't just things that we leave here when we leave this building today. They aren't just things that enter into our lives on occasion. They are things that are always there. Things that are always within. Because you are. You are peace. You are love. You are oneness of all that is. I am peace. I am love. I am oneness. I invite you to silently affirm these things with me. I am peace. I am love. And I am oneness. And I invite you to take these things with you as you leave today, knowing that you are. You may open your eyes when you're ready. I invite you to continue to honor the divine within as we move into a new Lord's Prayer. Thank you, Pete. That was beautiful. Did you write that? Yeah, thank you. So is everybody enjoying the sun? I don't know about you, but I love looking up through these skylights and seeing blue sky. Coming from Texas, I was telling a friend last week, I was like, God, Mindy and my wife and I, we're looking so forward to it warming up. And she told me, and I point because it was Josie, but she told me, she said, in Wisconsin, you learn to look forward to the signs of spring. And that really kind of changed it around for me. Instead of thinking, oh gosh, I'll be so glad when it's warm, I'm appreciating it as it happens. The birds, the sun's shining a little bit longer, the blue sky and the sun. So anyway, just had to share that. It was kind of an epiphany I had. So thank you for that as well, Josie. Sometimes I need reminded also, so thank you. So in his song, Pete mentioned bravery and strength and things like that. And so I wanted to kind of ask, has anybody in here seen the Harriet Tubman movie? Yeah, we've got a few. I finally saw it last week, finally. I remember I saw the trailer advertised because I went to the movies on Christmas and I saw the trailer advertised. I was like, oh, I want to see that. So finally it came out on Amazon Prime and I was able to see it. But I've always had this fascination with Harriet Tubman and just that time period in history. Just the bravery that Miss Tubman and people like her showed back then during that time frame. I mean, can you imagine what it must have been to have the bravery that she had then? Now, I think I've always kind of had this affinity for Harriet Tubman because in grade school, I remember, I think it was like second grade or something, but my teacher took these strips of paper and she wrote like a historical figure name on each piece and she wads them up and puts them into a hat. And she passed the hat around to the kids in the class and you drew a name. And whatever name you drew was the person that you wrote a report over. And I drew Harriet Tubman. And she was probably the first person that I ever really researched or wrote a paper on. So she's always been kind of close to my heart. But she was known for, really forcing people to just really dig deep and summon up some bravery. She had people probably go deep and realize bravery that they never even knew they had. Now, one thing that I always found interesting about her, and I don't know if this is historically accurate or not, but I remember reading about she was running with this man, and she's helping him to freedom. And along the way, he falls and stumbles. And he just lays on the ground. And Harriet Tubman looks at him and she goes, "Get up." And he's like, "No, I'm tired. I cannot go any further. You go ahead and go. Save yourself. Whatever happens to me, happens to me. If I get caught, I get caught." Now, Harriet Tubman wasn't going to have none of that. From what I understand, she was known to carry a little pistol on her hip. And it was said that she pulled that pistol out of the holster, she points it at him, she cocks it back, and she looks at him and says, "Live free or die." Now, I'm not sure what happened after that, but I would imagine that he got up and got back on his feet pretty quickly. But some may hear this story and think, geez, how much bravery it would have took to have taken a bullet. Well, maybe so, but that's not the type of bravery that I'm talking about here. We become brave when we instead decide not to lay there and just let whatever happens happen. We become brave when we decide that we are instead going to live free. We are going to get up and we are going to run this spiritual race and this spiritual journey, and we are going to live free. That's where the real bravery comes from. Now, I want to take Harriet Tubman's statement of live free or die, and I want to talk about that today. But I want to talk about it a little bit more in a spiritual perspective. Now, on that note, I'm not going to try to compare any of us today as to what those people who were slaves went through back in that time period. I'm not even going to try to pretend that we're going to do that, but I do want to take live free or die and look at it in a spiritual context. Now, for those of you who were here last week during Reverend Linda Martella Whitsett's workshop, she talked about levels of consciousness. And she talked about how when our levels of consciousness are really low, our light's dim. That natural light that we are just becomes like this dim little flicker. However, when our consciousness is high, that light shines bright. And I visualize, those spotlights that you can see all the way around town. That's what your light becomes. It becomes like this giant spotlight. And I think about, and some of you in this room probably know this about me, and those that don't, I hope I don't freak you out, but I'm a paranormal investigator. Now, I've done this for several years and been on many investigations. Now, there are some, there's actually quite a few of them, because it's not quite how TV makes it out to be, where absolutely nothing happens. About midway through the night, you might hear a slight knock, you might hear what you think could be a footstep, maybe a faint whisper, and you're like, okay, was that in my imagination or did that really happen? And you're like, okay, I wish I had just stayed home in bed. But then there are also those nights when things go nuts. Unmistakable footsteps, talking. I've had a giant shh in my ear when I was in the room alone, and stuff even falling off of bookshelves. And then there's the occasion when you just put these brand new, fresh batteries in your equipment and they drain within seconds. So you learn as a paranormal investigator, and here's a tip to you all, if you ever do it, be sure you take lots of fresh batteries. But it's said that those things happen when things kind of ramp up and really start going kind of nuts and your batteries drain. It's said that those things happen because the energy is strong at that point. Whatever there is strong, and it's using that strong energy to manipulate its environment in the way it wants to manipulate its environment. And you might look at me and think, well, Evan, that's all well and good, but I'm not a ghost. I'm right here. How can I manipulate my environment, use my energy to manipulate my environment the way that I want to? And I'm going to say, when we not only learn how to do it, but we actually do it and we put it into practice, we are choosing to live free. We are choosing to live maybe in such a way that we have never lived before. And we can do this with the realization that we can manipulate the environment around us. We have that power within. And this includes being able to create that space for nonviolence within our lives, within our daily tasks and daily chores. And when we create it and we practice it in our lives, we also begin to share it with others, perhaps even inspiring them to do the same. Now, back to the statement of live free or die. It is in practicing our spiritual principles in which we can choose from moment to moment whether or not we're going to live free or die. And of course, when I say die, I don't mean a physical death. I'm referring back to perhaps those lights that Reverend Linda spoke of last week, where we can choose to allow our lights to shine brightly, or we can choose to allow them to dim. Now, author Charles Johnson once quoted, We are to think of ourselves as immortals, dwelling in the light, encompassed and sustained by spiritual powers. The steady effort to hold this thought will awaken dormant and unrealized powers, which will unveil to us the nearness of the eternal. Now, I hear immortal beings, and I hear spiritual powers, and I'm thinking that sounds pretty darn powerful to me. It doesn't sound like I'm just waiting for stuff to happen. It sounds like I can get out and make things happen and kind of have a little bit of a say-so of what happens in my world, in my daily experience. Now, another thing that Reverend Linda mentioned a bit about last week was the Unity 12 powers, and how when we take the time to study them, understand them, and actually use them, we draw upon some really great strength, and we can bring about amazing changes in our lives. Now, I realize that not everybody in this room is probably familiar with the 12 powers or knows much about them. So just kind of simply stated, Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore, he believed that we possess 12 spiritual abilities, something that he termed 12 spiritual, or our 12 Unity powers. And he taught that these 12 powers were perfectly expressed in Jesus, and as such, are present in every one of us as well. So today I really want to focus on a couple of those. I'd like to focus on strength and understanding. And I would like to talk about how they can be utilized in our daily lives to practice nonviolence. Now, when I picture strength, I go back to DC Comics and I think about the Incredible Hulk. I think about that big green dude, he's walking around, this big old muscular guy, and he's like using his strength to smash buildings. He's probably lifting houses with his pinky finger. All kinds of crazy stuff. The guy's got strength. And while that's fun to imagine, that's not the strength that I'm talking about here today. I'm talking about spiritual strength. I'm talking about truly being strong in making the choice of how you want to show up, and then taking it just a little bit further. Challenging yourself to take it just a little bit further. So what are some ways in which we can show up? And what are the ways in which we can use strength in our everyday lives? Now, if you've heard me give a Sunday talk before, you've probably heard me mention words, using our words. And I'm going to go back to it again because it is so very, very important, especially as we practice nonviolence. So let's go back to the Hulk for a minute. Practicing nonviolence isn't just about physical restraint. It's not just about saying, well, I didn't hit anybody today, so I did my part in practicing nonviolence. That's not what it's always about. Our words are very powerful. And probably far too many of us know that words can either build you up or they can cut like a sword. So think about a child for a moment. I ask you just to think about a child. Let's say this child is using his or her imagination to sit and create a picture. You walk up on this child and they're drawing or coloring a picture. And you look at the picture and you say, you know what? That picture's awful. You can't draw at all. You're not creative. It looks like you're going to need to find another hobby. What do you think is going to happen? That child is going to always remember those words. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, but it's serious. That child is always going to remember those words. And on into adulthood, that child may grow up and always remember and always tell people, I can't draw, I'm not creative. What about, however, if you walk up to that same child and you take a look and you're like, you know what? What you're doing there is beautiful. You have such talent. You are so amazing. What do you think is going to happen? And I'm sure most of us know by now it's not with just children. It happens when we're adults too, right? We like to think we can just let it roll off of our shoulders, but it's not always that easy. And this is the time when we can practice nonviolence by first thinking about what we're going to say. Thinking about the words we use and how they're likely to affect someone. For instance, we can ask ourselves, are my words going to build someone up, or are they going to tear them down? I remember my mother telling me as a child, and I don't know if she's watching this right now. She just got back to her home from South Carolina, so she's probably still in bed. But if she's watching this, she used to always tell me, Evan, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And I used to kind of laugh and be like, whatever. But it's true. And it can really be used as we practice nonviolence in the world. Proverbs 16:24 in the Bible states, gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. And Ephesians 4:29 states, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So next I want to talk a little bit about another Unity 12 power, which is understanding. And one of the ways in which we can truly practice understanding when it comes to nonviolence is through harmony. Things seem to flow so much better when they flow in harmony, right? And as I was looking and preparing this talk, I came across one of our Unity booklets called Compassion, and it's called Living Life with an Open Heart. And I found a writing about harmony by Reverend Cherie Jameson. And she says, what is harmony? When it comes to music, harmony is two or more voices or notes toning together. If there is a melody, then to harmonize, you must listen and find a different vocal line to sing at the same time. You must agree to a structure, which is the song, but within that structure, you have great freedom to be creative and work together. Harmony doesn't have to be pretty. In fact, sometimes the crunchy or dissonant harmonies carry the most emotional impact. The same is true when considering harmony with people on a personal level. There are sure to be differences of opinion, beliefs, and worldviews, which may result in emotional dissonance at times. If there is a common goal or structure to work within, then it's easier to collaborate and find your unique voice to support the whole. That kind of teamwork doesn't happen magically. It takes willingness, listening, transparency, and often messy practice that's full of mistakes. With perseverance, harmony can be achieved but must also be maintained. Harmony with others is a habit to cultivate. And then she mentions that Anne Frank said in her diary, why can't we all just love each other and live together peacefully? That seems to be the million-dollar question. I need to come up with like an app for that. Don't you think? Somebody needs to come up with an app for that. But co-founder Charles Fillmore defined harmony as perfect accord with the goodness, the beauty, and the righteousness of omnipresent spirit. Everything is governed by fixed law, and harmony is its expression. So understanding can take a true spiritual practice because it requires a willingness. It takes a willingness to admit, you know what, hey, maybe my opinions, thoughts, and beliefs aren't necessarily the only opinions and thoughts and beliefs out there. And it may even make us say, heck, sometimes I'm not even 100% right. Nobody throw any tomatoes or anything. But we can also bring strength into the equation because it sometimes takes boldness and strength to make ourselves vulnerable. To make ourselves vulnerable to admit that we may not know everything. And that the way we've always done it may not be the way everybody else does it. And there really might just be another way. And we'll know when we begin to enter into harmony with another person. You're not going to say, am I feeling harmony or am I not? You're going to know. We'll more than likely experience constriction of some type. Whether it's a mental thought such as, I'd rather be anywhere than here, please stop talking. Or we begin to feel it physically. We may feel the need to run away. We may feel a tightness in the body. Regardless, you're going to know when you start to get into that place of disharmony with another person. And during those instances, we can begin to practice release. And actually, I guess I was kind of not truthful with you because release is actually another 12 power. So I guess I'll bring in 3 12 powers today. But there are many ways that we can practice release. And it's almost one of those instances where you kind of have to find what works best for you. But I'll tell you, one of the things that works really well for me is I enjoy ceremonial types of release. I enjoy participating in ceremonies where I can actually almost see the release take place. For instance, think about our burning bowl service here at Unity. That's a big ceremonial service of release, and In fact, most unity ministers will tell you that ceremony usually has almost the highest attendance of any other Sunday at church. But the key is that you don't have to just wait and do that release once a year at church. You can do it at home too. And I do want to put a plug in here because around the summer solstice, I plan on holding another evening burning bowl. So remember that. But I digress on that. It is something that you can do at home. Another thing that I like to do is a visualization exercise. I like to write down whatever it is that's bothering me. Then I like to visualize putting it into a balloon and just letting it go. Letting it go up into the sun where it'll just poof, be destroyed, won't be able to touch anybody else, but it's gone. And then I physically take that piece of paper and I tear it up and I throw it in the recycle bin. It just really helps me to release, and maybe one of those will work for you, or maybe you'll find your own way. Just make sure that you find some way if it helps you to visualize it, just to visualize that. And another way to live in harmony and to practice understanding is something that you hear so much about here at Unity, probably in churches across the world, and that is love. It so often always goes back to love, doesn't it? Love as being the foundation. Charles Fillmore once said, "We must love all because we are one." And let's just face it, loving can sometimes be darn difficult when we don't feel like loving, doesn't it? Can it be? When your spouse has left a pair of dirty socks on the floor, and Mindy doesn't do that, I do that, so anyway. But it can be difficult to love when we find ourselves in the midst of conflict with another person. When we find ourselves just really revving up and getting ready to just enter into this angry space, right? When we begin to focus on love, however, when we allow ourselves to focus on love, we begin to cultivate more of a practice of kindness and more of a practice of compassion, not only toward ourselves, but for other people as well. And when we do, we'll find that harmony just kind of seems to slide into place on its own. It's like we've suddenly found the missing piece of the puzzle in that moment. So when we show and practice love, our consciousness begins to shift and to move up. And what happens, back to what Reverend Linda said, our light begins to shine brightly. Now, loving others doesn't mean it's going to be easy all the time. We're still going to experience human emotions. We're still going to experience hurt. We're still going to get upset from time to time, and there's probably likely going to still be some discord. But when we feel those things, it doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. It may mean that you're doing everything exactly right. But it doesn't mean, what it means is that we begin to sit in an awareness. And that awareness can help us to catch ourselves when we're feeling something other than love. And when we begin to catch ourselves, we can acknowledge it and more quickly bring our feelings back to our center and back to that heart space where love is. And sometimes we might have to even kind of step away for a minute to bring ourselves back to those feelings of love. We may find ourselves right in the middle of an argument before we remember. And that's okay. It's perfectly okay to say, you know what? I don't think we're getting anywhere with this. I'm feeling anger, and I'd like to take just a minute to step back and go really kind of sit with my thoughts for a little while. Go and gather my thoughts. And then maybe we can revisit this conversation. Think about how much better that would go than to just let it go, just to let the anger go. Now, we may also think about strangers and think, how can I love a complete stranger? How in the world can I practice love with someone I don't know, especially when they're really ticking me off? You almost have to be able to bring yourself back to those feelings of oneness to do this. One of the most powerful exercises I ever participated in where I really felt true oneness was I'm involved in this project called the Mankind Project. And it's, just to make a long story short, it's a group of men that just get together and have ceremony and things like that. But I went away on a weekend adventure with them. And we practiced this exercise where we had two circles. And the circles of men were facing each other. And it seemed really uncomfortable at first, but for a full 2 minutes, whenever the circle would change, you would stare into the eyes of another man. And you would just stare. And like I said, it felt really uncomfortable at first. But almost after a while, although this man in front of me was a complete stranger, I felt this oneness. I felt this, it's almost like there wasn't a sense of separation. And before long, I mean, there were men that were hugging each other and beginning to cry because we saw beyond just these barriers of this human experience. We saw the oneness in each person. Sometimes that's what it takes, is just to think about for a moment. You know, this person is walking the same path that I am. This person is in this human experience the same as I am. Why do we have to live in strife? Why can't we just move into that heart space together and remember our oneness and practice that love? It takes practice. But once you do that, you are going to experience a feeling like you have never experienced before. It all really boils down to having the willingness to be open, to be more loving, and to participate in the practice. So back to Harriet Tubman's Live Free or Die. Living free is living within this spiritual freedom. And it's available to each and every one of us. Not just me, not just you, every one of us. In fact, it is our divine birthright to be able to live free. What is it that I believe? Think about it. What is it that we are here to experience? We're here to experience love and oneness. And it's recognizing that oneness within each and every one of us and living from that place. And again, taking it just a little bit further. It's looking at each and every one of you in this room and seeing you as a part of myself. It doesn't matter whether we always agree on everything or not. That doesn't matter. We don't have to. And in fact, we shouldn't. Because we're all here to help each other grow and to evolve. We're all here to help each other to learn. So back to the words of the brave, great Harriet Tubman, live free or die. And today, I choose to live free. Namaste, my friends. Okay.